Standing Committee on Education to order. As usual, please silence your cell phones. If you wish to speak in the committee, you need to sign up on the sign-up sheet at the back of the room. If you wish to speak, before we begin, do any members have any introductions? Seeing none, please silence your cell phones and please call the roll.
Senator Carroll.
Here.
Senator Funky Fromeyer. Senator Givens. Senator Higdon. Here. Senator Meredith. Senator Neal. Senator Stivers. Senator Thomas. Senator Titchener. Senator Wilson. Here. Senator Wise. Vice Chair Williams. Here. Chairman West.
Here. We have a quorum. We have one bill on the docket today. House Bill 2, an act proposing to create a new section of the Constitution of Kentucky. Representative Miles, if you would come forward. Whenever you are settled, please state your name for the record and feel free to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Suzanne Miles, State Representative of the 7th District. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman, for allowing me to present today. This is House Bill 2, which is a constitutional amendment that would go on the ballot in November. The first section is the actual question that would be on the ballot. And then as you go into Section 2 would be the actual adjustment made to the Constitution that was originally drafted in 1891. So if there's any questions, I'm more than happy. I can go in more detail, but otherwise.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have any members with questions? I don't see any at this time. If you, okay. Committee will stand at ease. Yeah. We have a couple people signed up, I think one to speak for and one to speak against. But I'm going to go ahead and take questions first. We will start with Senator Thomas.
Representative Miles, my understanding is that when House Bill 2 first came before the House Education Committee, that was during a special called meeting upon adjournment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That exhausts my questions for now, Mr. Chair.
Senator Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Miles, are you aware, or do you have information that suggests that public education now is fully funded?
What is, I guess, Senator Neal, I could not accurately answer that because I don't know anywhere that it states what is fully funded education.
If I may.
Please proceed.
Well, have you investigated whether or not there's been sufficient funding in all aspects of the public school obligation that we all have?
I wouldn't say that I've necessarily investigated. I know that we go through the budget multiple times. I know that we have increased the funding for education year after year after year in multiple categories. But as far as specifically a golden number, we've never come up with a golden number. What is the golden number for education for the Commonwealth? And what you have before you is specifically a constitutional amendment that would go on the ballot. There's no discussion of funding that's physically in this bill. There is nothing enabling legislation as far as what that would be. It is solely a constitutional amendment to go on the ballot to see whether or not the voters would like to give the General Assembly the ability to consider what they fund as far as parents' choice and things like that.
Please proceed.
So let me ask you this then. You're familiar with the history of common schools and the responsibility we have constitutionally in that area as well, right?
Yes, sir.
So my question goes to this particular piece. Do you envision or do you think that well, let me ask you this way. We do have limited funds. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
So do you anticipate that the needs for the historical constitutional responsibility we have for common schools might be compromised by the desire to fund outside of the common schools, in other words, private schools?
Not necessarily, sir, that it would take funding away from the category that we've always traditionally spent on our common schools.
One-
I have nothing to verify that.
One more question, Mr.
Please
Chairman.
proceed.
So you can't assure this panel that funds will not be compromised as it relates to needs for common schools in favor of private schools?
I cannot guarantee the budget of whether it would increase or decrease any type of funding in any budget of the General Assembly.
Thank you.
There are no other questions, and you are in order. Please proceed, Senator Thomas.
Representative Miles. Representative Cameo yesterday on the House floor read off a list of 72 counties that only have public schools inside the boundaries of those counties. Do you have any reason to refute what she said? That's a simple yes or no question.
It is not necessarily a yes or no question. We already have, through the public school system, online schools within our state that go across boundaries throughout our Commonwealth. So as far as that being a yes or no answer, I would disagree that that is the only option they have in that county currently.
Senator Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in the body of the proposed amendment, it talks about the system of common schools. Do you know where there's a definition of common schools, Representative?
I don't know of anything specific as far as what's considered common schools. That was the original language in the Constitution, is what a common school was. My understanding, we've had a lot of people talk about the history of what common school was and why schools were the way they were set up. And it was basically from the time period of whenever we had people that had children that farmed, families that farmed and things like that, to work around the school system with that and have access for that. But it goes back to the possibility of whether unions, I think it was called the Bailey or Bailiff. Some of you all may know the history more so on that than I do. But it goes back to that point. We were very specific, though, whenever this was drafted, so there would not be confusion what common school was, to have public in the question, so there would not be any doubt.
Well, since we're lacking a definition, couldn't the definition be that any school that teaches a core curriculum of math, science, reading, history could be considered a common school? You know, it isn't our constitutional obligation to make sure that children receive an education. The Constitution really doesn't define what that mechanism should be other than a common school. So if we're all in agreement that a common school could be anyone or any organization that teaches the core curriculum, which our Kentucky Board of Education would endorse, could be considered a common school.
Yes,
And
sir.
if not, those who may have a, let's say, a religious affiliation could not be construed as maybe a prejudice against those organizations?
Possibly, but I think that circles back also to the ability of the court system of what the courts, whenever things have gone to the Supreme Court, it always circles back to the common school being a public school.
And I think part of this amendment is to try to give a definition as what a common school is and how that should be defined. And since the start of our Constitution, we've changed dramatically, such as homeschool.
True.
That's probably on this definition wouldn't be considered a common school, but they are teaching the core curriculum that we would expect, and we are ensuring that children get an adequate education. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Meredith. Any other questions from members? Seeing none at this time, we will, if you would like to move over or step back, we'll bring forward Mr. Eddie Campbell with the Kentucky Education Association. To speak against, whenever you're ready, state your name for the record and please proceed.
Thank you, Senator West. I'm Eddie Campbell. I'm a middle and high school music teacher from Knox County, currently serving as president of the Kentucky Education Association.
Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. KEA opposes House Bill 2 because despite its presentation, it will be detrimental to our Kentucky public school systems, opening the door for public tax dollars to stream into unaccountable private institutions with no public oversight. As the Kentucky Supreme Court recently noted in a unanimous decision, the Constitution plainly states that public money must go only for the public good, and public schools are plainly a public good. The Constitution is a statement of what the people want and what the people expect. The legislature should never be able to simply not withstand or ignore any provision of that Constitution. Our Constitution and the provisions for funding an efficient and effective system of common schools has stood strong since 1891. The fact that the legislature is proposing to not withstand 7 different sections of the Constitution to accomplish the goal of establishing private school vouchers is proof that the drafters and the people of Kentucky did not want this to happen when the Constitution was ratified. Our public schools are the heart of our Commonwealth. It's where our communities come together to cheer on our teams, to support our students, to serve our communities, and most importantly, to shape the future of the Commonwealth. All of our legislators take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that oath is a promise to the people of Kentucky. This is a dangerous bill that is bad education policy, bad fiscal policy, and bad public policy, and it does nothing to protect students and does nothing to ensure that all students in Kentucky will receive a high-quality public education. We ask that all members vote no on House Bill 2. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jim Waters with the Bluegrass Institute.
Thank you, Senator. And
Please
Jim
state.
Waters, president of the Bluegrass Institute for Public Policy Solutions. Appreciate the opportunity to just make a couple of comments about this bill. Actually, this bill, it's important to understand what this bill will not do. This does not establish policy. This simply allows the legislature to come back and debate what is the best education choice policy for our state. And, our opponents have to have confrontation here, but this is really complementary. This is, I think, about both and rather than either or. We don't need to talk about education in terms of either or here. This is both and. I think this will create the ability for the legislature to come back and pass policy that will widen the opportunities that parents in most other states in America have. And, this is not a new radical idea that we're talking about here. This has been going on for decades. And so I think that one of the upsides of being behind all that is we can see what some of the pitfalls are, and we can establish sound policy in light of that. But this bill does not establish policy. This bill simply makes it possible to have that discussion. And that was created by the court's ruling that if we want to have the same opportunities for parents in Kentucky that parents in almost every other state, including all of our surrounding states have, that we will have to amend the Constitution. So that has brought us here, and this amendment simply removes the barriers to having that policy discussion. I would like to thank the legislature for the fact that they have significantly increased funding for education. And I want to that gets overlooked, and since Kara was established, per pupil funding in Kentucky, inflation adjusted, has increased by 122% from $7,000 to $17,000 per pupil. So funding is important, but there's no evidence that simply more funding will close the large achievement gaps we see across our state, and will create the kind of dynamics that will bring education reform to our public system. We know from other states that the more choice parents have, the better their K through 12 system performs. It creates those dynamics. So, but I want to thank the legislature for trying to solve the funding issues and the equity issues, and I think that they've done a good job, especially in the last couple of budget cycles. They've sent a lot of additional funding to local districts. They can use that money to increase teacher pay, to improve their education system in their communities. And that's, I think, the right way to do this. And so I'm here today, and I'm appreciative of all the work that's been done on this. And Representative Miles, thank you for your work and this committee's work, and just all the leadership has been supportive. And I wanted to just thank you for that. I think it's important that we recognize that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'll stay right there just 1 second, I'm going to allow Senator Thomas has a question.
Is it Mr. Waters?
It is?
Yes, Mr. Waters. Would you agree that if House Bill 2 were to become law, then this legislature would then have the ability to appropriate public dollars to private institutions?
If this bill becomes law, the legislature will be able to come back and decide what it wants to do.
Well, that doesn't answer my question. We know to decide what it wants to do, but would it have the ability? My question was, and I'd appreciate an answer from you, would it have the ability to appropriate public dollars, public taxpayer dollars, to private schools? Again, that's a yes or no question.
That's one possible policy that could occur.
Okay.
But there are many.
And by using the word policy, you then admit, because your opening remarks said they're not making policy here, but you now admit that if they were to do so, have the ability to do so, that would be a policy shift.
But there would have to be a full-fledged debate, Senator, about what that policy should be. That's the way our system works, right? So if we can't even have that debate, which the courts prevented, but now we're going to be able to have that debate, and everybody is going to get to weigh in on that. So, but this bill is not about establishing policy. This bill simply makes it possible to have that debate. And I think that's good.
Nothing further.
That will conclude this segment. If we could now have Cindy. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, Senator Neal has a question. Sorry, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Along the same vein of Senator Thomas, would this enable, if passed, the General Assembly, you say, opens up to debate, for funds to go to schools that discriminate on the basis of sex, race, ethnicity, religion, disability, national origin, sexual orientation, or anything else?
Well, I mean,
Would it have the ability to do that? Yes or no?
this bill
Yes or no?
This bill would give you the ability to come back and debate what the right policy is for Kentucky. And I think there'd be a very vigorous debate about that. And in the process of that, discriminatory policies, I don't think would get much support. But that's not what this bill is about. This bill is about being able to debate good policy. I would ask the same question. Does this bill also allow the legislature to come back and create successful educational freedom programs that are found in almost every other state in this union? And
Actually,
I would say
I'm
yes.
asking the question here, and I would ask you to respond to it, if you will,
I did.
directly.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a yes or no. Would they have the ability to do that or not?
They would have the ability, I've already said, to come back
Is
and
that a
establish
yes?
policy,
Is that a yes?
to establish a policy and debate it.
Thank you. I'll take it as a yes.
Senator Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Waters, are you a lawyer?
I am not.
All the things that Senator Neal just asked are protected classes, and no state, are you aware of, no state agency or entity can do a discriminatory policy, to your knowledge, can do a discriminatory policy directed at protected classes. Are you aware that's been long resolved by the federal courts?
You said that better than I did.
Okay.
Yeah, but may I add?
Please proceed. Yes.
There's none of the 45 charter school laws in America allow a school to pick and choose their students. Not one. They have to take first come, first served. Please hear me. Charter schools are public schools that are managed differently than the traditional public schools are. But just for that little bit of innovation and freedom, they are doing great things in many places. Are there some that are failing? Yes. Just like there are some traditional public schools that are failing. But, I don't think we throw out the baby with the bathwater here. And I want to make that point. Not one single charter school law in America allows a charter school to pick and choose, for example, to deny a learning disabled student admission. They must follow the same admission laws that every public school must follow. And so I think that's really important.
Senator Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just some information. How many states have school choice? Do you know?
Well, public school choice, which are public charter schools, and by the way, those schools are chosen by parents, which is the greatest form of accountability you can have, by the way. I hear a lot about accountability, but 45 states, I believe, have charter school laws. Kentucky's the only state that has a charter school law, but no charter schools right now, which is kind of embarrassing, actually. But a majority of other states have some type of program like we passed in House Bill 563 here with education opportunity accounts, education savings accounts. There are some states that have a scholarship program for learning disabled students. They can use those dollars to get a better education. And by the way, Senator, I appreciate the comment earlier that the job of the General Assembly is to ensure that students have access to a quality education. And I think this discussion ought to pivot from protecting a system to making sure our students get what they need, whatever that may be, in every case. And I really appreciate it. I think the dollars are to educate students, not to simply fund a system. And I think that's a big difference.
And I think that we'll always have our commitment to public schools, however this comes out.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to know from those states who have this choice, do both successfully exist in the same space?
And in Florida, for example, and if you at bips.org, there's a plug but if you'll type Florida versus Kentucky in there, you'll find out some amazing things about how at one time Florida trailed Kentucky in key academic indicators. Now they have passed us up. In fact, they've passed the rest of the nation up except for one state, and they have spent less doing it. And then, along with that, the more choice options they've given parents, which the more they've expanded choice, the better their K through 12 public schools have performed, because it creates the dynamic that brings the appropriate kind of pressure on the public system to do what more funding, more regulation, more experiments have failed to do in many cases.
Well, it concerns me that people think this is an either-or
Oh, yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And
This is both and. This is both
Exactly.
and. I mean, I would challenge anyone to show me a state that has lots of school choice where their K through 12 system is performing worse now than when they began to give parents those options. It's not there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Neal. You were first. Okay. I had you on the sheet. I'm sorry. Senator Funky Fromeyer.
Mr. Waters, thank you so much for being here. And I was surprised the gentleman that testified before you said terms that feel alarming about dangerous bill and high quality of education. And I've been blessed to serve even during the interim, and the truancy and the literacy levels are astounding and was shared with us during the interim education committee. So when I hear dangerous bill, can you help me understand how is quality measured?
Well, this is why we're so adamant that this be a parental choice bill, because every child is different. Every child has different needs, and we think that the parent ought to be able to decide what is a high quality education for their children. And I think there's going to be a lot of kids that public schools meet that standard, but there's going to be some that need something else and something different. So I think that's up to the parents to decide what is the best option, the best fit. And we have some objective standards. The National Association of Educational Progress has told us in Kentucky that only about a third of our students are reading proficiently and doing math proficiently. Those numbers are down in the single digits in some cases for low-income minority students across the country. Again, I would challenge anyone to find anything that has worked better at closing those gaps than public charter schools in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, even in California and across the nation, where they have closed those gaps, and children who had no opportunity before now have had their lives changed. And I think that's quality. When that happens, that's high quality stuff. Thank you.
Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Waters, you have referred to this as a either or choice or a both and choice on several occasions. Are you aware that in our budget historically we have a finite amount of money designated for education? Mm-hmm. Are you aware of that? Mm-hmm. I can't hear you. Is that a yes? I mean, you should keep shaking your head. We want to get you on the record here. Is that
sorry,
a yes
Senator,
or no?
let me give a resounding yes to the fact that we have precious, scarce resources.
Okay.
Yes.
Given that answer from you, then wouldn't public schools suffer if any portion of that money, whatever that X number is, if that money was siphoned off to private institutions, then the amount of resources or finance monies left for public schools would be less. Isn't that correct?
What is the money for?
Well, answer my question, please.
Well, right. It's for educating the students. So what we found is that in Florida, for example, as I mentioned, they've actually increased spending much less than we have in Kentucky, and yet they're getting a better result from their public education system. So I don't think this is a zero-sum thing. I think this is about giving parents who need another alternative, another option. I think it's about doing that, but I also think it's about creating the dynamics that occur when there are choices and when some dollars can follow the student. I've asked many people who oppose this, how much money would be enough to spend per pupil, at which point you would begin to say it's not about the money, it's about accountability, it's about reform, it's about transparency, it's about all these other things. And I can't ever get a figure on that. So we've increased spending 122% per pupil funding since CARA, and yet we have we have a third of our students that are reading proficiently and doing math proficiently. So you tell me what that number is.
Thank you for answering my question.
Okay. Senator Williams.
Just one question, and maybe I'm not a lawyer. I probably should know the answer on this before I ask it, but I believe that teachers in Florida make more than teachers in Kentucky. And when we have these charter schools, what happens to teacher salaries? Is there a trend in these schools that have been, states that have introduced this?
And, one of the things we see happening with public charter schools is they are beginning to they're beginning to receive more equitable amounts of funding compared to their traditional public schools, which wasn't always the case. For many years, charter schools were really only receiving a third to half of what the traditional public school students were. So we see an improvement with that. We also think that that policy of public charter schools gives public school teachers options, and some public schools are able to offer benefits that others can't. So I think it becomes a situation, again, whatever is best for the student and whatever is best for the teacher.
Next up, we will have, if Mr. Waters, if you would step aside, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cindy with the League of Women Voters, and going to do something a little different here. If Mr. Campbell could come back up from the KEA. I believe we had a question for you as soon as the League of Women Voters is done with her presentation. If you would state your name for the record, then proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for letting me speak. I will be very brief. We had a statement prepared some time ago on this issue, and with this last minute meeting, we were not prepared to share that, but we will send it to you so it's on the record. Just bottom line, I'm Cindy Heine, and I'm a legislative liaison with the League. The League supports public education for all and the use of public funds for public schools. So we would oppose changing the amendment or amending the Constitution. But as good League tradition, the good thing about this bill is the people will get to decide. So your decision to put it on the ballot allows the public to make this decision. So thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Senator Fromeyer, did you have a question for the KEA representative?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Campbell, and thank you for being an educator of our students. We do love our educators. And what I'm a little surprised by, we had so much testimony during the interim about the literacy levels of our students, and even in my Campbell County, we had one of our judges and a number just talking about the quantity of students that aren't showing up for school. When you call this bill dangerous, how do we address that high quality of education? How do we address that?
Making sure that we're supporting our educators and giving them all the resources and materials they need, but we also need to make sure that we're focusing on, are we providing the students that come into into those classes a class size that's manageable for the educators? You know, if you're working with 30 students and you have an hour, it's 2 minutes per student. So let's if we had half that, then you have extra time to work with those students individually to address their needs, to make sure that we're taking care of all of their learning disabilities, or if they have a learning disability, to give extra time for those students to really address the needs of the students. We need to make sure we're supporting with resources so that we have high quality, evidence-based resources in the hands of educators, but then giving the educators the autonomy to actually teach with the students on a daily basis and work through and individualize their learning. When we talk about individualizing learning, we're focusing on what the student needs, the individual student, taking care of them, and not working from a script and trying to blanket one size fits all for those students. If we give that opportunity for our students, then we're going to see all those results change.
Senator Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chamber. Mr. Campbell, good to see you. Thank you for your testimony and for everyone follow the testimony. I think your background you mentioned was with band.
Yes,
music.
I was in music. I did band for a long time, and then I was a choir director for many years.
So I'm big with competition.
Mm-hmm.
I think competition's good. And if you as a band director, or you in your role of being in band, I know that a lot of times that's chairs. You have to work your way up. Maybe you have to beat some people out to get to be the best in what instrument you play, or from chairs that you may be at this level, you move on up to this level. Are you against competition amongst schools and allowing school choice and allowing schools maybe to thrive if they have more competition and to bring their level up than maybe where they are today?
Thank you for the question, Senator Wise. I think we do have school choice right now. This body has passed legislation that allows for students and parents to go anywhere they want, even if they want to go from one public school district to another. That was passed just a couple of years ago. So I think parents have that choice, and they're able to make those choices now.
Follow up, Mr. President.
Please
Mr.
proceed.
Chairman, excuse me. So in terms of just additional more offerings of a student that a parent thinks could thrive more in a different environment than what currently is being offered that you mentioned of what may be there right now, but additional choices for parents to make that they think is in the best interest of the child that they have.
So, and thank you for the question again. So instead of trying to build a new system or fund a new system, let's release our public schools to make those changes so that they can meet the needs of students. If we have a student that thrives in a virtual learning environment, let's give our public schools the opportunity to provide that. If we have students that thrive in a small classroom setting, let's give our public schools the opportunity to innovate around those and the freedom to innovate around those. You know, a lot of our public schools are constrained with a lot of things that have to be done that are put in place. Let's give our districts, give our schools, give our public schools educators that autonomy to really own the profession, to own the education of the students, and give them the opportunity, all public schools, so that no matter where they are, that they have access to the things that they need to have a successful public education.
Senator Tishner.
Thank you for being here. I would just like to know your answer. You know, when I look at the test scores and results for literacy and math and how that has really been decreasing, we can't just blame COVID. We've come up a smidge since then, but it has been moving in a downward trajectory. What do you say to the family whose children are in the public school system, who are failing, who are producing those results, and they can't leave? Because really school choice is about funding that educational freedom for the parents to be able to leave, to say this isn't serving my child. Are we supposed to keep them in that system even though it's not serving them?
So I think the parents have the choice to move their student to a different school within the district, to a different county. We have that right now. You know, the parent being in there, educators want to be partners with the parents and work to make sure that those student needs are being met, to individualize that instruction. There's not a public school teacher in the Commonwealth that if a parent walks in and says, I see that my student is progressing like I want them to, I want to make sure we're moving them along, let's work together, let's partner together so that the educator has the resources to meet that student's needs, and that the parent for their child has the opportunity to utilize and strengthen those resources also.
I hear you say that, and then I think back to your comments of saying one size doesn't fit all and classroom size is a problem. This is, you know, one size doesn't fit all. Kind of school choice kind of solves that. Classroom size, school choice can solve that too. And what we've been doing as a state is funding the system of public schools only, which is one system. So is that truly tailoring to a child that might have educational needs that they can't be served? And we can't look at the results that we have and ignore the fact that some children aren't being served in our public school system. And although I have such respect for our teachers and their desire to teach students, and they do a great job, perhaps it's an opportunity now for us to be able to broaden up the opportunities for children who can get served in an environment that's specifically tailored to them that our public school system isn't able to do.
But being able to give the public school the opportunity to meet the needs of every student, so that every student that comes through the door, because no public school ever turns any student away, as they come to that door, to make sure that we're meeting their needs, that takes funding. And I know we appreciate the additional funding that's been coming into our school districts, but we have to keep that up. We have to really think about how can we address every single need. And if we have a child that's coming into a school that has specific needs and that school doesn't have the facility to make that happen, let's make sure that we have a good policy on the books that will allow that school system to tailor to that child's needs. Give the educators the autonomy to make that happen.
I have a question. This is a hypothetical, and most of what we've been talking about is really school policy and not really the essence of the bill itself, but that's fine. That's what Education Committee's for. But this is a hypothetical question, okay? Is it possible, if we were to pass this amendment and the amendment finally passes by the voters, and the legislature comes back in, and we allow funding of public charters, is it possible that you could, depending on how that's set up, you could actually see more money flowing into the public system? So for instance, if we set up a public charter where the SEEK funds flow to the student but not the local component, is it possible that there could be a situation where the public schools would actually have fewer students but more money to educate those students? And you also could have the possibility of more private dollars coming into the public system. My question is that possible? Could we see that? Is that an option the legislature could enact?
I mean, you're the legislature. You can enact what bills that you put forth and vote on. As far as would public schools, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
Well, to me, it's a math equation. So, for instance, the public school has this many students. They get the SEEK component, the state component, plus the local component. If one of those students goes to a charter school and the SEEK component, state SEEK component follows them, but that local public school keeps the local tax portion, that would be a scenario where the local school has fewer students to educate, but they have more money in that system. Could that be a better situation for that? There's a scenario where that could be a better situation for that public school. Is that? It's clearly a possibility. I would think.
Again, I'm not sure I could answer that.
See, Senator Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eddie, Mr. Jackson, sorry, we've known each other for quite some time, so I'll just call you Mr. Jackson. I appreciate the fact that the League of Women Voters has stated they feel this needs to be on the ballot. Not sure they support the issue or not, but it should go to the people for a decision. And I ask that to you, Mr. Jackson. I feel kind of odd saying that to you because we probably call each other by our first names, but the Constitution is a statement of what the policy is. And you just made a statement that says we can vote for whatever we want to, but right now we're limited by the Constitution on this issue. Is that correct from your reading and understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So any oversight that is there, we could direct the oversight. We could direct a lot of different things. We can't discriminate against protected classes. But if we wanted to direct in an impoverished area or an underserved area or a low attainment area, and if we want to get into discriminatory, maybe we want to designate the west end of Louisville as a charter school only in and only for the west end of Louisville. We could not do that right now, could we?
That would be considered, if it was specifically written as for the west end of Louisville, that would be considered special legislation.
And so we could not do that right now.
According to the Constitution.
Thank you.
Senator Williams. Seeing no further questions, Senator Neal. Didn't see you, sorry.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. There's been discussion about protected classes. Do you know whether or not sexual orientation or gender identity is a protected class?
In Kentucky, I don't think so. I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't think so either.
Any further questions from members of the committee? At this time, we will bring Representative Miles back up here. So Representative Miles, after all of that discussion, we'll let you have the final word.
Well, I think it's very interesting that the League of Women Voters would come out opposed to a constitutional amendment. They're supportive of people having the right to vote, but they're not supportive of the people having the right to vote, which is a little confusing to me, especially since the whole conversation has been about policy, and I appreciate the debate. I'm hopeful that we could have that debate if this amendment passes in November of 2024. But the reality of those are, we've got lots of hypotheticals. We keep talking about whether or not there would be discriminatory, and we keep talking about people having choices right now within the public school system. And quite honestly, we don't have a lot of choices because it is the haves against the have-nots. If you want to talk about discrimination, it's about the economics of the parents out there and the children that do not have choices and the parents that don't have choices. And so that is part of the conversation of why we brought this piece before you, of a policy decision, of a constitutional amendment, to have that conversation so that the legislators could potentially make sure that we let every single child in the Commonwealth have the same access to education. The same access to education. Education is the greatest equalizer ever. And it's been interesting to hear the policy conversations. We've already, I've had a group of people in my office earlier today from KEA, and they immediately went down the list of all the horrible, terrible things that this bill in front of them does. And I said, the reality is this gives you an opportunity to go vote, is what it's about. But I'm cautioning you on the information that you get out there to do your homework. Don't depend on organizations to feed you the information. Do your homework, read the legislation so that you know exactly what that is. We talk about changing the Constitution, whether or not we should. That was the tremendous amount of debate that took place in the House yesterday. The reality was we have several people that I'm looking on the committee in front of me, including myself, that if decisions haven't been made in constitutions and we have not progressed through the years, I would not be allowed to be here in front of you today testifying as an elected official. So just keep in mind that times change. Since 1891, we are not the same place in education as we were at that point in time. We hopefully are in a more progressive area at this point, and I'm hoping the best is yet to come for every single child. Senator Tichenor has, she's referenced several concerns that we've had, the amount of kids that have not come back to school after COVID, and where have those children gone? Are those children safe, and are they being educated is a huge concern for many of us. So today we have a policy decision in front of you solely for a constitutional amendment. I would hope that you all would consider moving this forward, that we can put it on the ballot, have the people vote, have parents an opportunity and children an opportunity to have the equal opportunity of every single one to have access to the very best education our policy decisions hopefully can make in the future.
Thank you, Representative Miles. We have a motion on the bill from Senator Williams. We have a second from Senator Funky Fromeyer. Please call the roll.
Senator Carroll.
Aye.
Senator Funky Fromeyer. Aye. Senator Givens. Aye. Senator Higdon. Aye. Senator Meredith. Aye. Senator Neal. Senator Stivers. Aye. Senator Thomas.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to explain my no vote at this time.
Please proceed.
On day one of this session, I got up, and I don't normally do this on the Senate floor, but I made a statement about the fact that I was really concerned about how we were going to present bills this year, and I wanted to make sure that every bill that got voted on, there was significant public consideration, public dissemination, and the public had the ability to speak to that bill. That has not taken place with respect to this bill. We've heard Senator Miles indicate that when this bill was first discussed by the House Education Committee, it was discussed in private. Now it was a specially called meeting, but it wasn't done at their normal time, the normal hour that the House Education meets. It was done at a time where it would get less attention, less notice, and therefore less input from the public. It was then brought to the House floor with limited debate and then passed. And now we're seeing here in the Senate the same approach. We had a House Education Committee meeting today, and I would submit on a conservative, just being conservative, there were probably 7 times the number of people there today at our traditional time at 11 o'clock than there are now, at least 7 times that number. And yet we did not bring this bill, this very important policy bill, before that House Education Committee for debate. We waited until late in the day where there'd be less attention and less notice to discuss this bill. I think this approach is flawed. That's not the only reason I'm going to vote no, but this time I'm voting no and highlight the fact that there's been limited debate, limited attention, limited notice to this bill.
Senator Tishner? Senator Williams?
I'd like to explain my aye vote.
Please proceed.
It's interesting, common schools. Somebody said, what is a common school? In 1892, we put that in our Constitution. And a common school is a local school. And it's interesting, if you look up Webster's, they'll say that the definition of common school went out of use about 1900. Okay, so shortly after we did the Constitution, we lost the common schools. And in this Wikipedia, they say the common school era is viewed by many education scholars to have ended around 1900. In the earliest 20th century, schools generally became more regional as opposed to local. I would say since then, we've become state controlled. And the only reason we're here is because we tried to give some local communities the ability to have a charter school in the sense of what really common school meant in 1890, which was local schools. And but we're all going to have a vote of all the people of the Commonwealth. And I think that what this will do, again, it's not going to do anything other than allow us to do a policy where maybe we can get back to common schools or local schools in local communities deciding what's best for their communities. So that's why I'm voting aye.
Senator Wilson? Aye. Senator Wise? Aye. Chairman West?
I'm going to explain my aye vote. Make a short comment just to the process. So this is your bill right here. It's been filed since January. There was a 2.5-hour floor debate in the House. Our regularly scheduled Education Committee meeting was today at 11 o'clock. As I walked in at 11 o'clock today, it was posted on the board that we would have a meeting upon adjournment in room 171. Been posted all day long. We had an hour-long meeting on this one bill in this committee. So I believe we've had good process on this bill, and stakeholders have had ample opportunity to make their case. And I proudly vote aye on House Bill 2. House Bill 2 has passed with 11 aye votes, 2 no votes in favor of expression. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chairman and
Miles.
Vice Chairman and Committee.
One moment.
Were you called, President Stivers?
We'll stand at ease.
Were you called for this role? Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Okay, Senator Stivers. So sorry.
We want to make sure that President Stivers is on the record.
Because I had him. I had him checked. I had him checked saying yes. So sorry.
So hold on 1 second.
It's still. I had him checked as yes. So I had already counted you as yes.
The vote is still 11-2 and passes with favorable expression.
Thank you.
This committee